Hakeem Jeffries didn't just give a speech, he issued a moral indictment. In a moment that felt less like politics and more like a sermon, Jeffries tore into Republican lawmakers for what he called policy violence, accusing them of weaponizing hunger and poverty against the American people. When he said, ripping food away from the mouths of hungry children, that's policy violence, you could feel the weight of it hit the room.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you to my good friend, Representative Stephen Horsford, for those very powerful words. And of course, I'm so thankful for Congressman Tim Kennedy, who has joined us as well, and other members of the House Democratic Caucus who were part of this incredibly powerful and important meeting, led by Bishop Barber and joined by so many different distinguished members of the clergy, of different faith traditions, denominations, and backgrounds, but all here today to make clear that fighting for the health care of everyday Americans, for the poor, the sick, and the afflicted, for the least, the lost, and the left behind is not a partisan issue, it's a moral issue. And standing on the side of the health care of everyday Americans is the right place to be. Fighting to make sure that no one in this country, the wealthiest country in the history of the world, should go hungry in America. That's not a partisan issue, it's the right place to be. In every faith tradition, as we will hear. So we're so thankful for their moral leadership, thankful for the moral clarity that they've brought to this issue, thankful for the inspirational wisdom and vision that was imparted to us as members of Congress, standing on the side of the American people. And it helps to continue to fuel our efforts to stay the course. This is not a fight for Democrats or Republicans, it's a fight for the American people. And we're going to stand on the side of the health care of the American people, of the safety of the American people, of the well-being of the American people. And lastly, I'm just appreciative that these distinguished members of the clergy, these great faith leaders, have also brought with them individual Americans who are being impacted by some of the extreme policies that have emerged from the administration and from this Congress this year, who we'll also hear from. And Bishop Barber and these distinguished members of the clergy have reinforced the principle that in America, poverty or hardship is not a choice that people are making. It's as a result of policy violence being visited upon everyday Americans. The largest cut to Medicaid in American history, that's policy violence. Shutting down hospitals, nursing homes, and community-based health centers, that's policy violence. Ripping food away from the mouths of hungry children, seniors, families, women, and veterans, and using them as a political pawn, that's policy violence. And the refusal to extend the Affordable Care Act tax credits, the unwillingness to find a dime to meet the health care needs of the American people when some folks can find $40 billion to bail out a right-wing dictator in Argentina, that's policy violence. And so I'm just thankful for these great men and women of the clergy, thankful for these patriotic Americans who've come to share their stories with us, and we've heard from folks from West Virginia and North Carolina and other parts of this great country, as you will as well. And now it's just my great honor and privilege to yield to the distinguished bishop who has brought us together. We know he's a voice for the voiceless. He's a mighty man of God. He's a powerful, profound, prophetic, principled pastor, Reverend Bishop Barber.
Hakeem Jeffries' words cut deeper than a typical political soundbite. When he said, "That's policy violence," he wasn't exaggerating. He was calling out a brutal truth that too many in power would rather we ignore. Because what's happening in this country isn't just about politics. It's about how political decisions can either sustain life or destroy it. When the government slashes food assistance, they're not just tweaking numbers on a spreadsheet. They're deciding whether a child goes to bed hungry. When Medicaid is gutted, they're deciding whether an elderly person gets their medication or goes without. When hospitals in poor communities shut down because of funding cuts, people die, not because of fate or bad luck, but because of deliberate policy choices made by those in charge. That's what Jeffries means by policy violence. It's not physical violence in the traditional sense. It's the slow, bureaucratic kind that kills hope, dignity, and sometimes life itself. Jeffries framed this as a moral issue, and he's absolutely right. Because at its core, governance isn't just about balancing budgets or debating legislation. It's about moral priorities. Who do you protect and who do you sacrifice? Who gets compassion and who gets neglected? In a nation as wealthy as the United States, hunger should be unthinkable. Poverty should be a political failure, not a personal flaw. But instead, we've normalized suffering. We've turned empathy into a partisan issue. And here's the bigger picture. This policy violence isn't random. It's systematic. Every time Congress decides to cut social programs under the guise of fiscal responsibility, they're reinforcing a hierarchy of who deserves to live well and who doesn't. It's a quiet cruelty that disguises itself as efficiency. Billions can appear overnight for wars, corporate bailouts, and tax cuts for the wealthy, yet when it comes to feeding children or funding hospitals, suddenly the money's gone. That contradiction isn't just hypocrisy, it's ideology. It's the belief that the poor are expendable, that the vulnerable must always prove their worth to deserve care. Jeffries' framing of policy violence exposes that ideology for what it really is, a moral rot at the center of American politics. He's not just talking about hunger or healthcare, he's talking about a deeper sickness, a system that treats people as statistics until they're useful, as burdens until they're gone. And he's demanding we see that violence for what it is, not invisible, not abstract, but deliberate and deadly. This is why his message resonates, because people are exhausted from watching politicians debate human survival like it's a math problem. They're tired of hearing about budget ceilings while the floor keeps collapsing beneath them. Jeffries' words remind us that poverty isn't inevitable, it's manufactured. It's the outcome of policy, not fate. And once you understand that, you realize that the same political power used to harm can be used to heal. So when he said, "We're fighting for the least, the lost, and the left behind," that wasn't just rhetoric. It was a declaration of what politics could still be if moral courage replaced political convenience. And that's a challenge, not just to the GOP, but to everyone in power who's grown comfortable with injustice. Because neutrality in the face of suffering is also violence. Silence in the face of hunger is also complicity. This is where the moral argument becomes personal. Every viewer, every voter has to decide which side of that equation they stand on. Are we okay with living in a nation where billionaires thrive while children starve? Are we okay with a system that finds money for missiles but not meals? Because if we are, then Jeffries' warning should haunt us. This isn't just bad governance, it's moral decay. What Jeffries did in that moment was give language to what millions of people feel every day but can't always articulate. The pain of being told by your own government that your suffering is too expensive to fix. That's what makes his words powerful. They weren't abstract, they were deeply human. So if you take one thing away from this, let it be this. Every policy is a moral statement. Every vote in Congress carries human consequences. And when we call out policy violence, we're not being dramatic, we're being honest. Because ignoring suffering is a political act, too. If we want an America that actually lives up to its promise, an America where people don't have to beg for dignity, then we have to keep demanding accountability, compassion, and moral clarity from our leaders. That's why voices like Jeffries matter. And that's why platforms like Left Lens exist. To remind you that politics isn't just about who's in power, it's about who's being protected and who's being left behind. So stay engaged, speak out, challenge injustice wherever you see it. And don't just watch, be part of the movement that says, no more policy violence. Like, share, and subscribe to Left Lens, where truth meets clarity, and where we refuse to stay silent in the face of injustice.